Episode 20 Corruption. Some questions are born less from thought than from impact. A cruelty too deliberate to dismiss, a lie so deeply settled it no longer needs to hide. A form of injustice repeated so often that people begin to speak of it as though it belongs to the world. And then the question rises almost on its own. Why would Allah allow this? The question can be sincere, but it can also hide something else, a habit of lifting the gaze upward before turning it inward, a way of standing before the wreckage while speaking as though the human being arrived after it. So here is the question that frames this verse. When the world begins to come apart, why does the Quran draw our attention not first to the heavens, but to the human hand? ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. Corruption has appeared on land and sea because of what people's hands have earned. So he makes them taste a part of what they have done, that they may return. Surah Ar-Rum, verse 41. The verse begins with what can be seen. Corruption has appeared, it has surfaced, it has entered the open. What was once hidden in appetite, greed, vanity, domination, envy, and heedlessness has taken form in the world itself. It now lives in speech, in systems, in economies, in relationships, and in public life. This verse does not begin by inviting speculation about divine decree. It begins with the altered face of the world and traces the disturbance back to its source. Something within the human being has crossed its boundary and entered the world. Fasad is not evil in the abstract. It is corruption after order, distortion after balance, decay after something had been set as it should be. A soul can suffer fasad, a family can suffer fasad, a market can suffer fasad, a civilization can suffer fasad. The outward form may remain, the inward soundness begins to diminish. That is why the verse speaks of land and sea. The corruption is no longer confined to the hidden chambers of the self. It has passed into the shared world. The earth begins to carry the moral imprint of those who inhabit it. And here lies one of the most unsettling truths. Much of what disturbs us in the world began long before it became visible. Then the verse names the cause with remarkable directness. بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ, because of what people's hands have earned. Kasab is not accidental. It is chosen, pursued, repeated, then settled into pattern. A lie protected long enough becomes public language. A greed rewarded long enough becomes policy. A cruelty tolerated long enough becomes the new norm. The verse is severe in its honesty. It does not deny divine decree. It denies human innocence. When confronted with ruin, the instinctive question is often turned towards the heavens. Where is Allah in all of this? Yet the verse insists on a prior reckoning. What have human beings done with the freedom entrusted to them? What have they pursued, excused, financed, concealed, rewarded, and normalized? This does not suggest that every grief can be traced to one simple human cause. Suffering is not so easily reduced, but it does expose a reductionist habit of thought, the readiness to question divine justice while leaving human responsibility curiously untouched. Then the verse introduces a word that changes its entire moral atmosphere. لِيُذِيقَهُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي عَمِلُوا. So he makes them taste a part of what they have done. A part. That single word is immense. Humanity is not being made to bear the full consequence of its corruption, only some of it. Enough for the illusion to break, enough for the pattern to show itself, enough for people to encounter something of what their own hands have released into the world. There is mercy in that limit. For were humanity made to bear the full consequence of its own facade, very little would remain standing. This is why the verse cannot be read crudely. It is not handing people a neat formula by which every sorrow is traced to some moral equation. It is showing something wider and far more sobering than that. When corruption spreads through human hands, the world itself begins to reflect it. Yet even then, what humanity is made to taste remains measured. Then comes the phrase that opens the heart of the verse, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ, that they may return. This consequence is not arbitrary. The fracture is not without meaning. The exposure is not an end in itself. It is a summons. Return to what was abandoned. Return to justice before it became negotiable. Return to truth before it became inconvenient. Return to the fitrah before language began excusing what conscience once rejected. Return, above all, to Allah. The verse is not offering a cold theory of suffering. Human beings are made to experience enough of the consequence to realize that corruption has a source and that the way back has not been sealed. That is what gives the verse its depth. It does not merely expose the wound, it preserves the possibility of return. Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu narrates that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam relayed from his Lord in a hadith Qudsi, Ya ibadi, inni harramtu dhulma ala nafsi وجعلته بينكم محرما فلا تظالموا. O my servants, I have forbidden oppression for myself, and I have made it forbidden among you, so do not oppress one another. This settles something essential. Oppression cannot be attributed to Allah as though dhulm were part of His attributes. He has forbidden it for Himself and forbidden it among His servants. The horror of oppression belongs to the betrayal of His order, not to His nature. This does not lighten the weight of suffering, but it protects the mind from a crude conclusion, the reflex of placing blame upon Allah while leaving the human being morally unexamined. The world does not become disfigured in a single moment. It spoils through what people repeatedly permit themselves to do, then teach themselves not to feel. Then one day the damage stands openly before them, and they ask, why has Allah allowed it? This verse refuses to leave the question in that form. It returns the gaze to the human being, to his choices, his appetites, his silences, his arrangements with falsehood. Then, with extraordinary mercy, it says that even now, even after so much has surfaced, the purpose of being made to taste some of the ruin is return. So perhaps the more honest question is no longer simply, why would Allah allow this? But rather, how much of what we grieve in the world is the long shadow of what human beings allow themselves to become? And if the door of return remains open, what within you still refuses to turn back?